Welcome to Total Reddit with another news story of r/paranormal. Today's story title is, a man once said if you want a good story just ask any random person, if there was ever an event in their life they cannot explain. Someone almost always has one weird thing that has happened to them. So Reddit, regardless of whatever you believe about the world, what's your story? Part 2. So this video is going to be very interesting and creepy for you, so keep watching the video till the end. Before jumping to the main part of the video, please hit the subscribe button to know when the next video goes live. A couple of years ago my great-uncle passed away. After the funeral, maybe a day after Ike, a group of close family and I went out to dinner with my great-aunt, that just lost her husband. While we were eating she got a phone call and she looked up extremely pale, answered it and then hung up. It was from my great-uncle and no one was on the other side, and his phone was at her house with no one home. Definitely freaked everyone at the table out. I was homesick sometime during HS, 11th or 12th grade. I was sitting in my computer chair playing Skyrim when my dog, who was usually contempt by himself and never one for affection, came into my room and laid down staring out my door. Me being alone and this not being his normal course of action, unnerved me a bit, so I closed my door and went back to playing. Not 3 minutes later I hear the voice of my mother calling my name, clear as day. She's a school teacher, so she would have been at work. Shitting myself I try to be as quiet as possible, and lower my TV all the way down to make sure I didn't attract whatever I heard and could hear more clearly, only to hear the bedroom door upstairs slam shut. Sat in my room and noped all day long in silence until my mom came home. I asked her if she was home earlier and denied it. One of the scariest moments of my life. When I was in the 3rd grade, I remember waking up in the middle of the night and seeing the silhouette of a woman standing in my door. She definitely wasn't my mom, and I just stared at her for a bit, a little scared but not scared enough to really do anything, lol. Eventually, I heard a voice in my head, that wasn't mine, say she won't hurt you. So I almost immediately went back to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I told my mom about what happened, and I guess earlier that morning, before I was awake, both of my brothers said they saw the same woman at their door, but didn't hear the voice. We all physically described the same woman, and she looked eerily similar to our great-grandmother, that died before any of us were born. My mom was freaked out, my brothers and I just kind of thought, that's weird, and didn't dwell too much on it, lol. I have a very unusual surname. On a flight home after a week away for work. Chatting with the dude next to me. Discussion comes around to plans for the weekend. He says he's heading out to the west of the state, to check out a house his parents just bought. I mention that my family is originally from that area, and drop some ideas for the weekend. Ask him exactly what town. When he says the name I say, well, my family was one of the founding families there in 1855. I ask him the name of the street and he says the name, which was where my great-grandfather had built the first house. I asked him what he knew about the house. He says well, it was actually built by one of the founding families. I think their name was Degarals or something. I just pull out my boarding pass and handed it to him. He reads out my name U/Degarals, holy fuck. We were both so eachless. Must have been 5th grade, when I was sitting on the couch watching TV with my dad. As 10 p.m. rolled around my dad fell asleep in his lazy boy, as is the nature of fathers. With my dad asleep, I figured I would watch a little more TV, before I turned in. While sitting there I heard, and I remember this so vividly, a clown's laugh coming from the room behind me. I was petrified, but eventually mustered the courage, to poke my dad awake and tell him what happened. I don't blame the guy for shrugging it off as my imagination, but here I am 10 years later, and I still firmly believe my ears were not playing tricks on me that night. Had an accident when I fell asleep driving. I went off the road when I reached a T headed straight into a wooded area going about 50 miles per hour, but ran into a telephone pole's guy wire, heavy cable driven into the ground at a 45-degree angle to the pole. Well, that cable was a godsend, because it absorbed most of my kinetic energy, and significantly slowed me down. To give you an idea of how much energy it absorbed, it cut into the front end of my car about 2, slicing the battery in half in the process. It also pivoted me around 90 degrees so I was sideways, when I went down a hill into the woods. Rolled the car about 3 times and ended up on the roof. Completely missed all of the trees. I extracted myself from the crash, gathered my stuff and walked away from the accident completely unharmed, was wearing my seatbelt. I walked home, which was about 2 miles, it was 2 a.m. and pre-cell phones. After I got home I noticed about midway on my right thigh, a perfect one, square of fabric was gone from my khaki pants. I'm talking about a perfect square. The edges were so clean, like it was carefully carved out with a scalpel. No cuts or scrapes on the skin of my thigh. It was surreal and creeped me out. I believe that after I die, I will be presented with this one piece of khaki fabric and be told it wasn't your time. When I went back to the scene the next day, the telephone pole guy wire had snapped, and the pole, while still standing, had been pulled so hard that where it went into the ground, the hole was elongated about 6 before it sprung back. No sign of the square of fabric. When I was 6, my great-grandma passed away and myself, sister and mother went to her open casket and were saying goodbye. When we went to leave, the door was locked, and we couldn't get out. We were stuck in a funeral home with our dead grandma. About 20 minutes later, the receptionist found us and let us out. She asked what we were doing and we said that we got locked in. She looked at us and said the door doesn't have a lock on it. Mom's convinced that great-grandma didn't want us to leave. I was measuring ingredients for a cake in my apartment when I dropped my blue plastic half-C measuring cup. I heard it go tock as it hit the ground once, and then no other sound afterwards. I immediately looked all around for it, but it had vanished. By the end of my search, I had removed all the drawers, moved the appliances, and checked inside, under or behind everything in the kitchen and surrounding areas. I've moved 3 times since then and never found it. I hope the eldritch horrors the next plane over are enjoying my half cup. This happened over 5 years ago now. My sister, 9 at the time, and I, 14 at the time, shared a room, with our beds next to each other. Normally our beds were 4 feet apart, but they ended up being directly next to each other one night, probably because at the time, she was constantly doing gymnastics on her bed, which would push the mattress. That night, I dreamt of a glass doll with long, dark hair. I remember feeling like I needed to protect it. I tried my best to keep it safe, promising it would be okay. But as I said these words, the doll's hair began falling out. I dropped the doll and it shattered. With the help of doctors, the doll was glued back together, and her hair grew back. When I woke up, I felt like crying. I didn't understand why I had that dream. I noticed my head had left my pillow at some point, and it was against my sister's head. When she finally woke up, she told me about her dream. It was the same. By this point I was totally freaked out, but she didn't believe me when I told her. I guess she thought I was messing with her. 6 months later, my sister was diagnosed with cancer. She ended up losing all her hair. And like the dream, her hair grew back and she got better. She doesn't remember this happening, and I'm still just confused about it all. In a way, I'm thankful for the dream, because I got to somewhat emotionally brace myself for what was to come. I don't really tell anyone about it because it doesn't seem real, and I'm pretty sure I'd sound crazy, lol. I clearly remember that when I was younger, my brother and mother said our apartment was invaded when we weren't home. I even remember the posters around town showing pictures of the guys caught on camera. They had 2 BT4 in case anyone was inside. Funny enough, I've reminded them both of this occasion, and they say that they never said that, and our home was never burglarized. Think about it every once in a while, but just dismiss it as a dream that I must have had when I was younger. My girlfriend had a Blackstone heart ring she'd wear when I met her, but it would occasionally somehow fall off, despite being a tight fit, only to be found in odd places days later. Eventually she tied it on a leather strap, and gave it to me to wear around my neck. It was a very tight fit over my head as it was a bit short. It was an effort to get it on or off, but we joked that at least I wouldn't lose it. One day we were packing up the family holiday home we'd sold, 2 hours from home, and while loading furniture into the trailer, I must have snapped the tight strap and lost it. We only realized halfway home. Searched the trailer as we unloaded, but no sign. We'd sold the holiday house, so no one we knew could even go look for it, so we finally accepted this time it was lost for good. 2 years later, my dad was mowing the lawn on the ride on it home, and he went to our paddock to empty it. He got off, emptied the clippings. But when he got back on and reached for the gear stick, something sharpish grated his grip. The ring was sitting balanced on the top of the gear stick, the leather string wound down the gear lever, but still intact, not snapped. He was alone in the middle of the paddock. We have no idea how it got there 2 years later, 150 kilometers from where it was lost. I asked my now wife where it came from originally. She found it in a kooky little pop-up shop of witchy type things. It was the only ring there and it was also the only second-hand item they had for sale. The kicker here, I put it in my wooden box of special items, so we'd never lose it again. I went to get it to show someone a few years ago, and wasn't there anymore. Thanks for watching the video. Write your opinion about this story, and don't forget to subscribe for the next videos.